Hello and welcome to the Collapse Experiment. So today we are going back into Epstein from this book, Volume 2 of One Nation Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb. And this section is very interesting because it ties in together. If you are familiar with conspiracy theories, there was a Netflix documentary series called, I believe, American Conspiracy. Or conspiracy theory, The Octopus, which had to do with Danny Casolaro and his murder and what he was discovering with the Promise software, among a whole lot of other things. And yes, Epstein, although he is not mentioned in that documentary series, was a part of that. So we're going to start here on page 19. And there's one name that's going to come up. And I'm going to riff on this guy. So this, let's see here, BCCI run blank trafficking operation had some obvious similarities to the operation that would later be run by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, with Maxwell's actions in that operation paralleling the actions of Bijam Askir Rahim to a considerable degree. Returning to the matter of Epstein's past claim to have been tied to the CIA during this period, yeah, he did say this quite a bit to different people. There's also evidence of Norinco specifically working with the CIA assets to arm the CIA-backed Mujahideen in Afghanistan. Michael Riconosciuto. Do you recognize that name? Who was then directly affiliated with the CIA and who programmed a backdoor into Promise. Also claimed to have personally assisted the CIA effort to arm the Mujahideen in Afghanistan with unassembled Chinese rocket systems in 1986. Riconosciuto alleges that he aided the specific effort using pre-existing connections of his to Norinco. In an interview with author Sherry Seymour, Riconosciuto stated that the furnishing of weapons to Iran, the Afghanistan Mujahideen, and the Contras, Iran-Contra, was done by the single entity which he referred to as simply the company. I don't know, is this different from the deep state? Is this the same people? Did he just come up with his own name for something that we associate with something else? I don't know. Riconosciuto said that the Mujahideen and Contras would pay for the arms with drugs, not currency. What was happening in the U.S. during the 80s? The crack epidemic. As part of the parallel arms for drugs trafficking operation that was detailed in Gary Webb's Dark Alliance, among other sources, the FBI would later refer to the company as a case file on Andrew C. Thornton II. Why not just Junior? Why is it the second? Calling it a CIA-linked network of former Special Forces officers and law enforcement officials involved in the smuggling of cocaine into the U.S. Another associate of Riconosciuto during this period, named W. Patrick Moriarty, doesn't sound like a Sherlock Holmes villain at all, was also deeply involved in managing negotiations and trade agreements with China during this period, supporting Riconosciuto's claim that he and his networks were connected to influential Chinese firms such as Norinco. The Norinco connection to BCCHC is, as well as the alleged connection to Epstein and then CIA-connected Riconosciuto, makes the case that Norinco was involved with the CIA-affiliated individuals and entities during this period as it relates to arms deals. Now, how does Epstein get connected with all of this? Furthermore, given that Khashoggi was affiliated with Saudi, American, British, and Israeli intelligence by 1982, it is also possible that Epstein made his way into the fold of intelligence himself through Khashoggi. So he was financing a lot of these operations, and Khashoggi, he was helping with the transport of a lot of these weapons. He was a arms dealer who was helping funnel weapons to the Mujahideen, I guess, and the Contras. And Epstein was working with him to launder a lot of that money through different things. Now, Khashoggi, how you know that name, was, I believe it was his nephew who was killed by the Saudis. Journalist. It was a year before the Las Vegas shooting. And his body, he was in a foreign country, killed in a hotel by Saudi operators, I guess you would say. And they completely dismembered him and hauled his body out in duffel bags. That was how they disappeared Khashoggi. And so this is his uncle. So the whole family is involved in all kinds of wacky, zany stuff. Getting back to the book. Epstein's affiliation with some national intelligence agency was essentially confirmed in 2019 when it was reported that then Secretary of Labor Alex Acosta, who had signed off on Epstein's sweetheart deal during his first criminal case, had been told to back off Epstein, that Epstein was above his pay grade. You're the prosecuting attorney for an entire state, and a guy diddling kids is above your pay grade. I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone, Acosta had reportedly told the Trump transition team. It is unclear that Acosta's reported statements exactly what intelligence agency, American or foreign, Epstein had been affiliated with and when. Well, he already stated the CIA, and it's pretty obvious he was working for a certain Middle Eastern country. It is entirely possible that, as Epstein once claimed, he worked for the CIA during this specific period and later affiliated himself with another intelligence agency. Alternatively, he may have worked for more than one intelligence agency at the time, being a double or potentially even a triple agent. Well, Robert Maxwell, we know he worked for American, Israeli, Russian, British intelligence. And if Maxwell was handing off the reins to Epstein, he may have just said, hey, play all sides. According to former Israeli military intelligence officer Ari Ben Manash, who I first interviewed in December of 2019, Epstein's affiliation with Israeli intelligence dated back to at least in the mid-1980s, when Ben Manash was personally introduced to Epstein by Robert Maxwell. Per Ben Manash, Maxwell introduced Epstein as having been approved by the higher-ups. Okay, so Maxwell himself confirmed this. In the Israeli intelligence network where Ben Manash and Maxwell were both operating, the introduction reportedly occurred at Maxwell's offices in London. During this period, Ben Manash has stated that he believes one of these higher-ups was Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, who was head of the Israeli military intelligence directorate, Amen. From 1983 to 1985, Ben Manash cannot recall the exact date of his introduction to Epstein, but stated that it occurred between 83 and 85, period in which Barak held the post. Barak would later become infamous for his close proximity not only to Epstein, but his trafficking blackmail operation, which is discussed in the next chapter. So there you go. We've got confirmation that Epstein was working for Mossad, Israeli intelligence. This came from Robert Maxwell himself. In a September 2019 interview with journalist and former CBS News producer Zev Shalev, he stated, Maxwell wanted us to accept him, Epstein, as part of our group. I'm not denying that we were at the time a group, that it was Nick Davies, foreign editor of Maxwell-owned Daily Mirror. It was Maxwell. It was myself and our team from Israel. We were doing what we were doing. So yeah, there's several people who apparently were introduced to Epstein and told to bring him into the operation. Past reporting by Seymour Hersh and others revealed that Maxwell, Davies, and Ben Manish were involved in the transfer and sale of military equipment and weapons from Israel to Iran on behalf of Israeli intelligence. During this time period, Ben Manish was not aware of Epstein being involved in arms deals for anyone else he knew at the time, but did confirm that Maxwell wanted to involve Epstein in the arms transfer in which he, Davies, and Ben Manish were engaged on Israel's behalf. Okay, so it's clear now that Epstein was balls deep in Israeli operations, if you will. After the initial introduction, Ben Manish would witness Epstein at Maxwell's offices on several occasions, stating that Epstein was frequently present at that location. Ben Manish stated specifically that Epstein used to be in Robert Maxwell's office in London quite often and would arrive there between trips to and from Israel. So, where did all that money go? Where was the pilfered pension of all of Robert Maxwell's employees? I think it's pretty clear where that money went. Ben Manish also asserted that Ghislaine Maxwell accompanied her father so frequently that she was involved in his intelligence-related activities to some extent, taking the reins from Daddy. However, he stopped short of saying how involved she was or what she had specifically been involved in prior to her father's death. Ghislaine's early life and her relationship with her father is detailed in Chapter 15. Aside from Ben Manish's claims, there is also statements made by Steve Hoffenberg that during the late 1980s, Epstein had boasted of his ties to Israeli intelligence services, claiming that it had been Ghislaine Maxwell who had made the introduction. Furthermore, Zev Shalev reported that another well-placed and independent source who would remain anonymous had corroborated with Ben Manish's assertions that Epstein had been an intelligence asset for Israel. This is all early. I mean, this is only page 22 of this book, which is like 400 plus pages. Close ties to Israel's government later in his life can also be seen in an odd visit Epstein made to Israel in 2008. Weird. What was going on around that time? The visit was odd partly due to the timing. The visit was odd partly due to the timing, as it took place during the course of his trial just a few months before he was sentenced to prison in June of 2008. Yeah, he was probably hoping that they would take him in like every other pedo Israeli citizen that gets flown over to Israel, where they just don't prosecute or have trials, because apparently they think that stuff's okay. In April of that year, the Palm Beach Daily News reported that Epstein was staying at the Tel Aviv Hilton and quoted an Epstein spokesman as saying that he was spending Passover meeting with Israeli research scientists and taking a tour of military bases. Why? Why would he be given tours of military bases? Access to military bases is certainly not something easily obtained by tourists to Israel, even very wealthy ones, again suggesting that Epstein had long-standing connections to Israel's national security apparatus, along with his friendship to Ehud Barak. Some have speculated that the timing of this trip saw Epstein implore prominent Israelis for aid in his legal troubles back in the U.S. After all, as will be revisited again in chapter 14, Ehud Barak was a key reason behind Bill Clinton's controversial pardon of Mark Rich, and Epstein may have thought a similar intervention would work to his benefit. Mark Rich. So let's take a break there because we just found something interesting. Let's find out who Mark Rich is. Mark Rich, trader, financier, Clinton pardon. On January 20th, 2001, his last day in office, last day in office. That's convenient timing, Bill. President Bill Clinton issued a controversial pardon for billionaire fugitive financier Mark Rich, who had fled to Switzerland to avoid charges of massive tax evasion, fraud, and illegal trading with Iran. And he did run. So the pardon caused immediate widespread outrage due to allegations that it was brought on by $450,000 in donations from Rich's ex-wife Denise to the Clinton Library and Democratic campaigns. Is Mark Rich still alive? That'd be let's see here. Is there anything? No. The charges. Rich was indicted in 1983 for over 50 counts of tax fraud, 48 million, racketeering, and violating oil embargoes, which could have led to a 300-year sentence. That's a lot of time. The controversy, the pardon was considered an abuse of power because it was not vetted through the standard Department of Justice process. Federal investigation into the pardon concluded in 2005 without bringing charges against Clinton. Clinton defended the decision, stating that he was advised by lawyers that the case should have been handled in civil, not criminal court, and citing requests from Israeli officials regarding Rich's charity work. Wow. Okay. So let me get this straight. The guy is illegally trading oil with the devil, Iran, and Israel's like, whoa. He's got some nice charity work. You should let this guy go. So, let's see here. Who is Mark Rich? He died in 2013 in Switzerland, so he never even came back here. Born in Belgium in 1934. Yeah, so he died in Switzerland. He was a Belgian-American commodities trader, financier, and businessman. He founded the commodity. Now, why would Epstein think were there any other charges? FBI most wanted list. Oh, well, there's a goal for you. Let's see here. On 65 criminal counts. Okay, this one kind of rounded everything up. Illegal oil deals with Iran during the hostage crisis. Oh, so maybe he was doing some backdoor deals with Iran regarding the hostage crisis? Interesting. Fled to Switzerland, became a fugitive on the FBI's most wanted list. Clinton. Okay, so even though this guy was wanted forever, illegal trading, fugitive status, corporate penalties. avoided jail as companies pled guilty to 35 counts of tax evasion and paid over $170 million in fines and penalties. Okay. Well, I guess that answers that. As for Michael Riconosciuto, let's go back to that dude, because I didn't really do a deep dive on him. But this guy, he's like the Forrest Gump of conspiracies, because he seems to have information on quite a bit. Michael James Riconosciuto. He was born, well, it's either it was 47 or 48. Is an American electronics and computer expert who was arrested in early 1991, shortly after providing Inslaw Inc. with an affidavit in support of their lawsuit against the United States Department of Justice. Okay, so this goes back to PROMIS and the PROMIS software. Riconosciuto professed a defense centered on the Inslaw affair, a legal case in which the U.S. government was charged with illegal use of computer software. Riconosciuto claimed to have reprogrammed Inslaw's case management program, PROMIS, with a secret backdoor to allow clandestine tracking of individuals. Riconosciuto stated that he had been threatened with prosecution by a Justice Department official. Riconosciuto provided an affidavit detailing threats to a House Select Committee investigating the Inslaw affair. Okay, so a lot of this, if you want to know more about that, just watch The Octopus on Netflix. Now, he's also, let's see here, the Cabazon Murders. Nathan Kaba, Emmy-winning series Octopus Murders. Featured documents from the archives of Michael Riconosciuto. These documents have been the subject of interest for a recent reopening cold case homicide. This had to do with a bunch of Native Americans. Is that the correct term? Indigenous peoples? Whatever. They were murdered on their reservation over a company coming in. And wow, there's really nothing on his Wikipedia. He appears in American Conspiracy, The Octopus Murders, a documentary series on... Yeah, okay, so that had to do with Danny Casolaro. He was prosecuted, so let's see here. He was arrested for conspiracy to manufacture, conspiracy to distribute, possession with intent to distribute, and with distribution a total of 10 counts related to methamphetamine and methadone. During the trial, Riconosciuto accused the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, of stealing 2 copies of his tape. Riconosciuto also claimed he himself had disposed of a 3rd tape. Okay. And this was a tape that Danny Casolaro went out and actually tried to find on the side of a road. Never did find the tape. So Riconosciuto, and I'm surprised this isn't in here, he also pops up with the Oklahoma City bombing, where he claims to have knowledge of some type of nuclear but non-radioactive, I don't know if I'm getting these terms right, bomb that would have been used to destroy the Murrah building, because an ANFO bomb would not have been powerful enough to take down a 1/3 of the building, which it did. On a funny side note, there is a YouTuber, let me look this up. So there's another YouTube channel called Interesting Books Reviewed. Now this guy, he's flown a drone over the Zorro Ranch. He got chased off. He's now got a couple of videos. I believe one of these is uncut footage of the drone flying over the ranch and what he's seen. He also went back a few years later and filmed it again. But he stated in one of his videos that he knew a guy who had worked at the Oklahoma City bombing site. He was part of the crew that was there. I don't know. I don't think it was search and rescue. I think it was more like demolition and construction. And that guy was saying that the crater where the truck was allegedly didn't exist, that they put plywood over it to hide the fact that there wasn't a crater because the FBI needed the story of a crater to show how powerful this bomb was that McVeigh did not build. There's also in another book that I have, it is, shoot, the files. What are the files? The Medusa Files 2. Okay, it's very important because there's two books called the Medusa Files. This is the second one. In that one, there's a chapter about Terrence Yeaky and how he allegedly had a disk from his computer with information on it that an investigator had to figure out, like, how do I get the data off of this? What is the data? And it was leveling radiation levels on the site of the Murrah building. And it showed that there was a spike the day of, and then it gradually went down, kind of showing that there might have been some type of other device that was used in order to take the building down. Which, I mean, if that is true, it kind of feeds into Rakana Shudo's story. So the weird thing is, and this is, I'm kind of going by the two guys who made the Octopus Murders documentary. They talk about the credibility of Rakana Shudo. This is a guy who was in prison for years due to allegedly manufacturing large amounts of methamphetamines. So this guy does have a felony. He's been in prison forever. He could just be saying stuff in order to try to get out, right? And they stayed in there like, he'll say something, it sounds bleeping crazy, right? But then they look into it. And the guy is right, or it's true, or he didn't make it up. There's like evidence to support what he just said. And so I don't know what to think of the guy. He's kind of zany. He's kind of wacky. He reminds me of a great uncle I had growing up, looks-wise. He's just a very zany dude. And yeah, let's see here. He was released from custody in 2017. Is he still out? Don't know. Because I believe he was going to try to jump his probation or parole or whatever he would have been on. And he might be out. If he is, cool. You think people would be interviewing the dude if he was up to it. He was in this series, so I don't know why he would be against being interviewed for other things like the Oklahoma City bombing or Danny Casolaro or the Cabazon murders or all the Iran Contra. Like, Iran Contra is a big freaking deal. Did he have any ties or run-ins with Epstein? So I find it interesting that this dude pops up in a book about Epstein and Iran Contra. And God, who's the other guy I was thinking of? Okay, the other guy that kind of ties into all of this because of the Mujahideen, Iran Contra, this whole thing with the Chinese rockets, Jack Oliphant, godfather of Arizona's militiamen. And Jack Oliphant, yes, Timothy McVeigh and several others had been to his property. And back in the 80s, Jack Maxwell Oliphant, he was hired by the CIA to train Mujahideen in the United States on how to use red-eye and Stinger shoulder-fired missiles, okay? So it was his job to train these guys on these munitions. Turns out that the Mujahideen were really good with the red-eye. I don't know what the difference is. I guess the Stinger missiles are supposed to be easier, but for whatever reason, these guys were really good at the red eyes. But which meant that there was a bunch of leftover Stinger missiles that conveniently disappeared. So Jack Oliphant, yeah, he's another one that he's tied into Iran-Contra. He's tied into the Oklahoma City bombing. There was also a FBI report that was filed. I remember seeing this on Twitter, where one of the FBI agents getting into the helicopter to transport Timothy McVeigh to his new destination warned the pilot, be on the lookout for guys on the ground with Stinger missiles because he has friends who have some. And the pilot was kind of like, oh, okay. So it's pretty interesting that all of these guys keep coming up. And Jack Oliphant, he's definitely an interesting character. He died, let's see here, it wasn't 1995. This article is from 1995. But it does talk about how, if nothing else, it is eerie coincidence that accused terrorist Timothy McVeigh, free to roam the entire country, spent the months before Oklahoma City bombing living in this remote part of America, not at all far from the enigmatic Elephant. Elephant is by turns outrageous and gracious, loving to laugh of the old codger. Okay, I don't think this was edited that well. Then saying something ominous about how easy it is to make bombs, much deadlier than the one that pulverized Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. He likes to be called Colonel. Oh, I see you've come to see the most dangerous man in America, he laughs, showing off his tiny gold post that substitutes for front teeth. I'm a real badass. Okay, so I'm gonna cut the video here. There's an interesting article from '95 by the Los Angeles Times you can find on Jack Oliphant. If you want to read this, but he also shows up in Wendy Painting's book, God, what is it? It's about McVeigh, but it's got a long-ass title. Heartland of the Real, something like that. Anyways, that's about it. Keep on typing.